Well, okay, so my talk will be about the development of XML web application that highly integrates document and data-centric content. And I will insist on the importance of validation during the development phase of such an application. So let me start by describing a little bit what are our targeted applications. We call them small data business-oriented application. And let us consider a very typical example about, for instance, about project management. I'm sorry, I think. Is it better? Okay. I don't know if you know the process of submitting a European project, maybe some of you, yes. If you have to submit a European project, for instance, you have to provide a document, generally it is a PDF document, that contains a lot of information about your project, describing your project. You will have some very text-oriented information, for instance, describing the objective of your project, the state of the art of research, and so on. But you also have a lot of information about the description of your project in terms of management and description of work. So, for instance, you will describe a number of work packages, okay? Each work package is organized in tasks, starting at a given month, and ending at a given month, involving a lot of partners and so on. Okay, this is a very structured information, and to avoid redundancy in such a document, it could be very interesting to adopt an XML approach to be able to generate some part of the document. For instance, if you have a structured description of your work package, you will be able to generate the table summarizing all the deliverables coming from the set of work packages. You will be able to generate automatically the Gantt, for instance. Okay, so this is a database approach, indeed, just to avoid redundancy in a document and to be able to produce a document with one source of information. Okay, and this is this kind of information that we are targeting with our tools. So, some words about the information, the underlying information model. Let us suppose your project has been accepted. Yeah, great. Then the first thing you do generally is to build a website. Okay, but you have a lot of information in the submitted document. Okay. So it's very easy using XLT to provide at least the beginning of your website automatically without using other tools. And then later you will have to manage your project. You will address administrative information, financial information, and so on. But all those information are really tied. Okay. So I think that in this particular case, it's a very, very interesting approach to use an XML approach to build this kind of application. And of course, if you have to disseminate information about your project, flyers, brochures, and so on. And it's funny to observe that currently, this kind of application are generally implemented using a set of different tools. Okay, some partners produce, or project manager are working using Word. And then separately using a part of a Microsoft project, for instance, to generate the Gantt. And then later they use a CMS to produce a website, and so on and so on. They use a lot of different tools. They do a lot of cut and paste and so on. But in my mind, it doesn't make sense. So this is the kind of application we are targeting, and we try to promote the use of XML and XML, the native database, to develop such applications. So why a full XML model? I think that it's obvious for all of you, I guess, that if you have to deal with both data and document-centric the content, XML is really designed in this purpose. And now we also know that the XML format itself is appropriate to represent each kind of object model coming from relational databases or object in the sense of programming languages. So, and well, on my side, I claim that XML native databases are mature enough to do this, and I will try to explain some of our implementations. Okay, this is just to give the global framework of our application. So, coming back to the importance of validation, let me just explain some examples. Keep in mind that what we want to do is to accelerate the process of development for the developers, okay? And we are convinced that if during the development phase they can validate a lot of information, it's very helpful and it really accelerates the development process. So, coming back to the example, you will have different kind of constraints that you would like to express in this framework. You will have a number of editorial constraints because the Commission imposes a lot of constraints, strict guidelines, like publishing a paper, okay? For instance, the global structure of the document has to be respected. And you have constraints like the fact that the summary should not exceed a given number of characters and things like that, okay? This is for the textual part, I would say. But now, if you want to process our data at the beginning for producing the document avoiding redundancy, you have a number of other constraints that you would like to express. For instance, uniqueness of the IDs of a work package. You are going to reference an existing partner in your database. Or, of course, data typing is very important because we want to compute some information, simple computing. For instance, the start time of a task should be less than the end time and things like that. Okay? And it means that, well, it makes sense to express a lot of constraints just to be sure that during the development phase, the code produced is quite safe. So, just some consideration about the modeling issues. Okay, if we consider the data-centric content, it's quite obvious that you can simulate the field-like information using the data typing system to constrain the information. Okay. Now, about the document-centric information. We really are in favor of banishing this, what I call boring mixed content. In fact, I think that it really complexifies a lot of things, the APIs and so on, that you know this. Huh? So, for instance, with our approach, let's suppose you would like to produce some textual information like this paragraph, okay? The underlying XML model would be the following one. You will say, okay, I don't have pseudo element here. A paragraph is made of fragments, and each fragment can be specified with an attribute. This is the XML spirit. You just declare what is the content, and then the application will take care of how to interpret the tags and so on. Okay. So in our model, here is the definition of our paragraph. Okay. And then now, if we consider the structure, okay, of the information, not the content. Well, as I said before. We know that XML format is adapted to represent data-centric structure. We can represent information where the order of element is not important. We may have a repetitive structure and so on. And if you consider document-centric structure, order of element is important. You have a high granularity, very irregular structure. It has been observed in the previous presentation with the patterns, for instance. It means that it is resulting in trees that are not balanced at all with document-centric information. Now, well, we have to specify a number of constraints, either if it is document or data-centric. Information which is mandatory, you have to check the uniqueness and the referential integrity, such in the database, the cardinality, and so on. And it's also interesting to introduce some business rules. Let us suppose, for instance, that you develop this application for your company, and you have some internal rules. And you say, okay, I have a lot of people working on different projects, but I don't want to have somebody involved in more than 3 tasks of all the project under my coordination. Sorry, okay? Well, this is what I call business rules. This is this kind of constraint that can be, well, should be modeled. So let us consider different solution. Well, roughly speaking, we have as candidates the XML schema, RELAX NG, Schematron. DTDs are of course discarded because they do not support data typing, okay? And now we are promoting an approach based on RELAX NG and Schematron. I'm very sorry, I don't understand why I can't. It's okay? Okay. So this is just a global comparison. I just take into account the 3 criteria, okay? Considering RELAX NG, okay, if we think about the content typing, that's interesting because RELAX NG allows you to use different data typing system, okay? So I think it's a very good point. Currently, we are using the XML schema data type because it is suitable for a large number of applications, but we know that we can choose another one in case of it, if it is necessary. Very good constructors to accommodate all the different structure are proposed by RELAX NG. Nothing about the constraints, of course. But Schematron is the good companion to express all the constraints, such as uniqueness and things like that, but also business rules. It has been partly designed in this purpose. Okay. We don't use XML schema for different reasons. For instance, yes, data typing, okay, it's not too bad, but well, we need to use this data typing system. Very weak support for an ordered element. It's really the major argument. And all the constraints, well, you can specify constraint about uniqueness, referential integrity, and so on. But, there was a paper last year addressing the subject and, saying that indeed using the assertion provided by XML schema 1.1 is a better way to express all the type of constraint in these terms that we can have in the XML flow. So this is the reason why we are currently basing all our development on the use of RELAX NG and Schematron. Okay, just to give you a small example in relation with our use case. If you have to model all the information manipulated by our application, what you are going to do is to say, okay, I have a number of projects. Each project is made of a number of information, of an ID, name, and so on. And here you will have content type. Content type, I just explained how it is modeled. It is something which is really document-centric information, okay? And concerning the information about persons, it's like it's like in the relational database. It's like a table, but you can represent tables with XML and XML model. Okay. Then, if I have a look to the document-centric information model, Then this is a simplified version of how to represent textual data. For instance, a paragraph will be a mixture of title, just one level of title in this very simplified example. And you may have then either paragraph or list. List may have optional list header and things like that. Okay, this is a typically document-oriented model. No problem, huh? we can represent this. And if we consider the data-centric part, for instance, the description of a work package, you have number, you have the reference to the responsible. We are using a reference to avoid redundancy, of course, and so on. And then you have the description of the task, each task having a number, a description, involved partners. Once again, the description of the work package itself will be textual content, okay, respecting our model. So this is a way we can represent the content type as well as the content organization. And the next phase is to specify a number of constraints on our model. Okay, and to do this, what we do, for instance, we are just considering here in my very simplified example, I express with Schematron a number of rules regarding the unicity constraints, okay? A number of rules for the referential integrity, and here a business rule, which is what I mentioned before. I don't want more than 3 persons involved in different tasks in my project, okay? So very, I would say, easy and quite natural to do with RELAX NG and Schematron. Now, as I said at the beginning, the goal is to provide the developers with some possibilities to make the validation during the development process. So, why? Because I think it's important for the developer to have in mind the full schema of the application, okay? And then to give him the possibility to check this model during the development process. So the way we do this using the exist database environment, we decided to, in fact, to annotate the schema, just specifying which information will be stored as a collection or a resource. The goal being to simply generate all the subschema that can be used to check each resource in the database. Okay. And well, it's quite also natural because if you develop information system based on relational database, the physical layer should be taken into account, and it's not, you don't work only at the conceptual level, so it makes sense. And then this being down, well, we have just validated this approach in the exist database environment, and in fact, we are developing XML web applications using a framework called Oppidum. It's a very lightweight framework to build web application, and it respects a RESTful approach, and it is based on the MVC classical model. And you have to define, when you develop an application with this open source framework, important, when you develop with this framework, you have to define your application in terms of actions to be performed on the resources, okay? And here, to implement what I mentioned before, for the generation of schema, sub-schema, we implemented an action called generate all schema. You have the model is an XQuery script, and then the view is just an XSL, okay? And activating this, this resource, okay, will have the following effect. In our database, we have a configuration part, and in this part, we have a collection called validation, and we have our initial schema, okay? And then after the generation of the schema, okay, the database will be completed with all those schema. And of course, we also generate we factorize, okay, all the definitions, okay, that are included from all the subschema. And then the developer are provided with the classical, I would say, validation possibilities offered by the database. So an important issue, anyway, with this approach is to provide the final users with authoring capabilities in the browser, of course. Because if you want to respect this model, and especially the textual model, okay, we need to constrain the information during the authoring phase. And we do it with two JavaScript libraries called Axel and Axel Forms that allows to introduce information that respects the model. Okay? For instance, here you have a kind of form to provide information about our package, but the description is really textual information. So just to let you understand what it is, just an example, because the paper that we proposed here has been written using this library. Okay, so you have a model. Okay, and then okay. Let us suppose that, well, now I would like to add an author, okay? Well, yeah, there is a structure, and this is editable during, okay, I can add what I want. And you see that you can generate either a list, paragraph, and so on. I have a preview mode, okay? If you just have to make some minor correction, okay, this remains editable content. Okay? So I think that it's very important if you want to guarantee that information is provided by human being, I would say. Okay. Well, so I would say that as a conclusion, what we have done now is intended to be integrated in an integrated development environment that is under construction for the Oppidum framework. Also to be completed, because I think that we can do more using this approach and integrating the concept of workflow, which is very, very often present in business application. And for other perspectives, I would say, this idea of annotating the schema can be used in other purposes. First, we intend to generate automatically the structure of the database for the data part. Not so obvious, because in some application you may have appendices and so on. Well, not so trivial, I would say. And another big issue, very important, is to be able to generate the editing template for Axel and Axel Forms. Because if you have this information in the schema, you can generate this template and you will avoid inconsistency between your global schema and the client side. For instance, Axel has a feature which is quite similar to Xforms for the specifying constraints like binding. Okay, let us suppose in the binding you say, oh, okay, this is optional, but in your schema it is the contrary. Okay, how to guarantee the consistency between the server and client side? It's very important. But I think that we can solve this issue by annotating our schema. So that's the point. And if you just authorize, I am authorized. I would like just to mention another application which has been generated with our tour. It is to advertise a conference about document engineering, markup technologies, and so on, that will be held in Lausanne in September. And I'm in charge of this conference. So I guess that some of you may be interested in participating, and I think that Mohamed will give the link this afternoon. So, thank you.
Right, we have time for questions. Any questions? I have one. Christine, would you consider moving purely to XML schema v11 now that it has assertions in it and all that, or do you see yourself sticking with RELAX NG and
No, I remain with, I'm now convinced for the reason I mentioned. It's, I think that, well, honestly, I think that the design of, relaxing is more, from a theoretical point of view, it's pure. And, well, there are major benefits.
Right, any other questions? Oh,
Actually, it's narrowing down your question a little bit. Just about the data typing, why is it a minus point? I know it's a theoretical minus point, but in reality, I've never come across an experience where it was really, where it really mattered.
Yes, but in my mind, it's a question of software engineering approach. You know, with the XML schema, I'm tied with the XML data typing. Even it's well adapted, but once I will be confronted with a specific application, why should I add this constraint?
It makes sense.
No?
Yeah. Thank you.
we have time for one more.
Just curious about the development, and you had a data-centric and information model. How did you evolve in kind of implementing this over the course of, what was it, a month or two, or 6 months, or a year, in terms of your user, or
you mean? I'm not sure I understand the question.
From the evolution, from the time you said, okay, we'll take this constellation of database and application and put it together to have a running application, something that you use. So,
the question is about the if we compare with a classical approach, or
and just your experience, how long did it take you?
Okay. No, I think that it's incredible how it is rapid to build application using this approach. Now we developed some good practices, I would say. Well, I was just speaking about validation here, but we know how to propose a reasonable, RESTful, approach, how to design the resources to be implemented and so on. And we also have some design patterns, some crude controllers, how to manage the update of the database and things like that. And it becomes mechanical, I would say, for this kind of application. It's very rapid.
Right, thank you very much, Christine.